Hi everyone, welcome to week 9 of English 97. I hope you guys had a great spring break and are looking forward to starting the second half of our course. So the week before spring break, we worked on invention ideas for Essay 2, and we're going to go over that assignment again, just kind of get your memory going. And then today I'm going to go over two really important parts to drafting an essay, how you start and how you end. So introductions and conclusions are something we haven't really looked at very specifically yet, so that's what this video is going to go over. So let's go ahead and get started. So the assignments for this week are readings for week 9 and a quiz, and then you'll have a discussion board due on Thursday as usual, and then Essay 2 draft is going to be due this coming Monday. So the draft I would like as close to 2 to 3 pages as you can get. Remember that this is our first draft, so if it feels kind of just like words on a page, that's okay. I want you just to, as best you can, get your words on paper, and then the next few weeks we'll work on sort of improving them as we go. So if you need a little refresher, Essay 2 that we're working on is called This I Believe, and the assignment is to choose a topic that you have a strong opinion about. Once you've decided your topic, I want you to think really hard about who you are writing to. I want you to have a very clear audience, okay? So go back to discussion board 8 before spring break that we completed. If you kind of don't remember what you were going to write about or need some ideas, some of y'all had some really great ideas going on there. So a couple things you want to make sure you figure out before you start. What is your opinion? What is your point? Okay? And that's going to be your thesis. So remember that your thesis should come pretty early in your draft, usually first or second paragraph. Once you've decided that, who is going to be your audience? Be as specific as you can. So for me, say I want to make an argument about needing more mental health resources at SWIC. This is something that as an instructor, I feel very passionate about, and I see my students really struggling with mental health issues that I can't really help them address. If that's my thesis, my audience could be a couple different people. My audience could be my students themselves, but I might also think about administrators that can make changes to the programs that we offer at SWIC. Or maybe I could write to parents of my students, or I could write to the government in Illinois. These are all different groups of people, and the way that I write is going to change based on who I'm writing to. Once you've decided these two things, your topic and then your audience, I want you to ask yourself, what kind of experience or reasons or examples can I give to kind of convey my opinion clearly? So for me, if I'm going to write about mental health resources at SWIC, I could talk about the wellness advocate that we have, who's great but overwhelmed. I could talk about the number of students that I've had who are struggling with mental health issues and how I'm seeing an increase in this. I could also maybe include some statistics if I want to. I could talk about some examples from issues that my students have had. But whatever you choose is going to dictate, the kind of reasons that you give. So one of the readings that we have this week is called The Danger of a Single Story. It's one of my favorite TED Talks ever. It's by an author named Chimamanda Adichie, and she is Nigerian. She's a Nigerian author. And this talk is a really just interesting story, but also I think it gives us a good kind of starting point when thinking about introductions and conclusions. So when you watch this TED Talk, I want you to ask yourself, how does she start and why does she start that way? And then when you get to the end, how does she conclude or end her discussion of single stories? Why do you think she does that? Another thing to think about as you watch is, what kind of single stories have you heard about other people and maybe about yourself? And why can those be harmful? I think this is really important in thinking about, making arguments and writing about things you have a strong opinion about, because you don't want to forget that there are always several sides, and that it's important to also think about those that might disagree with you, or, how are you not giving a complete view of the issue that you're writing about? So the focus this week, what I want you to focus on really as you draft, are your introduction and your conclusion. So how are you starting and how are you ending? So your readings this week, chapter 10 of Use What Works, talks about what we call localized revision, which focuses on introductions, conclusions, and then transitions, and also kind of how long your paragraphs are. So revision obviously is usually when we already have a draft written, but I think it's good to also look at it at this point. So to start off, you want your introduction to do two things. You want it to tell your reader, what are you writing about? And then to also give them a reason to keep reading. This is why your thesis is so important, because it plays a really big role in your introduction and in saying, hey, here's my point, here's my opinion, and here's why you should care about it too. So I'm going to go over a few different types of introductions. Some of these you may have seen or tried before, some of them maybe are new, but as I go over them, I want you to be asking yourself, okay, for my topic, which of these would be best for me to use? So let's start with kind of the most generic or the most common, and this is something called general to specific. So if you think of terms of a triangle, you're going from the widest part to the most narrow. So this is an example about mashups. And this student wrote, mashups are a new style of music that blends or mashes multiple songs together to form a new song. The creator of the mashup uses songs made by other people and rearranges them and manipulates them to create a new sound from old songs. Some people say this style of music steals from the original artist. They say that mashup artists aren't creative because they're not creating something brand new. Good mashups are creative because they make a brand new song even if they use old songs to do it. Okay, so what you can see is that they start with this general idea of a mashup and then they narrow down into their argument about it. One thing to keep in mind though is that this isn't very interesting. And honestly, as I was reading, you might have found yourself wandering a little bit mentally. And that's why you can start here in a draft, but you want to ask yourself, okay, how can I make this topic relevant to my reader? So who's the audience here? Musicians? People who listen to music? I'm not really sure. But as a writer, I might ask myself, okay, maybe I can talk to people who are into pop music and say, hi, have you heard this new song by, I'm blanking on artists right now. Have you heard this new song by Taylor Swift that mashes up two previous ones? And then I can use that as an example. So this is just one type of introduction. It's not always the most effective. Another introduction that can be a little more effective is to use an anecdote or a story. These, a lot of you used for Essay 1 because we were talking about stories and narratives. So this one's about bullying, and this student wrote about Jessica. So they said, Jessica ran to the girls' bathroom and slammed the stall door shut. She tried to slow down her breathing, but her heart still felt like it was up in her throat. Her eyes burned as tears gathered there. All she could think was, not again, not again. At least this time, I won't cry. And then they eventually end up with, this wasn't the first time Jessica had been bullied by a group of cruel classmates, and it wouldn't be the last. So this is a lot more interesting than that general to specific. They could have just started talking about bullying and then given their opinion. But make sure if you do this that your story is very relevant to your topic and that you get to your point. Some people, when they write a story like this, they just keep going on and on and on and on and on. Kind of like, do you have, I don't know, an aunt or an uncle who just keeps talking and telling the same story over and over? We want to avoid that in our writing. So a story can be a great way to start. It's not always the best choice, but it can be a good one. If a story doesn't sound good, how about starting with a question? So there's an example here talking about YouTube videos. This person says, who are the people who create and upload YouTube videos? Many would assume they're teenagers or people who have too much time on their hands. It might surprise you to know that a great percentage of video uploads are from businesses trying to promote their product. YouTube has become an important tool in modern retailing. So this is an example of starting with a question as a way to kind of get your reader thinking. And then the second example here combines question with a story. So you can also do more than one in your introduction. And one thing to remember when you're using questioning is that you don't want to ask too many. You ever, gotten home from school and your mom wants to know how your day was and they just start rapid firing questions at you? How was your day? Who'd you talk to? What did you do? What'd you learn? Obviously, that's not always the best way to engage your reader, but one question or a couple can be a good way to get started. And then finally, I wanted to talk about using a quotation. So this is a really good way to start if you have a quote that directly ties into what you'd like to talk about. So for example, this is a Maya Angelou quote, and she said, a bird doesn't sing because it has an answer, it sings because it has a song. I think it sings because it knows we need a song. I love music. I can't get enough of it. I've been singing since before I could talk. Music is an important part of my life. So I think this is a good example of using a quotation to start by start talking about the idea of music. But one thing you want to keep in mind is that this technique, just like many of them, can be overused. So whatever quote that you choose, make sure that it clearly supports the topic that you're starting with. Don't just throw a quote in there because you don't know what to say. So I want you to think, now that I've gone over some introduction types, ask yourself which of these would work for your topic. So let's come back to my argument about needing more mental health resources at SWIC. Maybe I want to start with a story about a student who's struggling but feels like they don't have any help. So I might start with, last semester in the fall, I had a student named Billy, I'm just going to change their name, who seemed to start the semester well, but towards maybe week 3 or 4, I could tell they started to feel very overwhelmed. They would come into class and not say much. I'd ask what their writing was looking like, or if they had anything they could work on in class, and they'd kind of sort of shut down a little bit. And then one day they seemed like they were really close to tears. And we went out in the hall and had a discussion about some personal issues they were dealing with outside of their class life, but felt like they didn't have anyone to talk to. And then maybe I could include a quote from a student about these mental health issues, or I could include some statistics about mental health at SWIC. But the idea here is that this introduction is based specifically on my topic and what will work for me and my audience. So while you guys work on your drafts, I want you to think specifically about how you're going to start. And if you're really struggling with that, it's okay to start with the body, start with your reasons, here's why I believe what I do, and then come back to the introduction. And we'll keep working on revising these as we go. The other end of the spectrum, or the other, the end of ends, is your conclusion to your paper. So something else I want you to think about while you're drafting Essay 2 is how you're going to end. This usually we might do after writing the rest of the essay, or you could also start here. Start with your last paragraph and then make your way back to the beginning. But a few things to keep in mind. You want to summarize what you're talking about, but don't repeat. I don't want you to just copy and paste your thesis into your conclusion. I want you to think about answering the question, so what? Why is this important? Why do I care, as your reader? Leave your reader with something to think about or something to do with this information. So I have an example here from the student essay Politics that is in our week 8 folder. This person was arguing that politics are important and that people should care more about them. And so they ended by saying, everyone should know a little something about politics because they affect the world around you every day. You can talk to your local politicians and see why changes happen and why certain laws are the way they are. There are also classes you can take to help someone to better understand law and politics. To get involved, get on your computer and do some research. It's truly that simple to help you understand how politics work and how you are affected. So this is a really good conclusion because it gives the reader something to do with this information. This person is saying, okay, now that I told you why politics are important, I need you to go get involved. This is what we call a call to action. So it could be a good way to end, but it's not the only option. So I want you to just ask yourself, based on your topic, what do you want your reader to walk away remembering or doing or understanding? All right, make sure that you answer that. So what? So keep these tips in mind as you're working on Essay 2 this week, and remember that this is just a draft, okay? So we'll work on revising and editing just like we did with Essay 1. I'm really excited to see what you guys have.